Russell Cailey, Managing Director of Think Learning Studio. I'm an honoured guest with the Voices of the Future here in Dubai. It's been a real honour to share some thoughts. This is a really crucial conversation that we're having regarding the future of learning, the future of education, and it's my absolute pleasure to be a guest here on the Voices of the Future.
We are truly delighted and honoured to welcome Russell Cailey, who is the Managing Director of Think Learning Studio. And he's joined us in our little studio, and we're going to be talking about everything learning, education, and guess what? ChatGPT and generative AI, I'm sure, and the future of learning and getting parents all excited and hot and bothered because this is something which is extremely close to their hearts. Learning and education is close to mine too, and it's been one of my core elements in terms of building my personal mission statement as I look into the future. So because of that, I'm especially privileged to have Russ join us today, and he's going to be talking to us about everything learning, education, and the future. Russ, welcome. Good to see you, sir.
Lovely to be here.
Russ, firstly, it's wonderful to have you here. Could you just tell us a little bit about yourself, who you are, and your background, and a little bit about yourself?
Yeah, of course. Grew up in UK, Manchester. Not pretty, working class, lower middle class background. School was fun more than anything else for me. It wasn't a place where I think achievement wasn't top of mind. Mm-hmm. It was more about sports. It was more about friendship groups. And yeah, we kind of all just coasted by, but there was a deep attachment to educators and teachers who cared, and there was an obvious realization that even back in Manchester in the mid-90s, there was a struggle going on in terms of resources, in terms of accommodation we were in, which wasn't great. And then, a college took a chance on me, which apparently I was told on the day of actually getting into my college, you shouldn't be here, you shouldn't be. But the principal, I always remember it. I was, you're doing this little sign-in sheet, and the lady was like, "Oh, well, you don't tick a few of these boxes." And just as it happens, the principal was over her shoulder doing her rounds. Mm-hmm. This principal later became my boss, and she just tapped her on the shoulder and said, "Take a chance on him. He's okay." And I was in the college and went to university, and then went back to that college many years later. I got authorized as a teacher in my mid-20s, and that principal was my boss for 7 years. So I often said to her, "Thank you. You really launched my career," because at the end of high school, I really could have gone in a few directions which weren't great, and I think I had a door opened into education. So I went back to that college for 7 years, and it was working in hard background in Manchester, gang kids who were struggling, and some students who were doing really well and went on to good universities, but a whole plethora of different people. And after 7 years, I kind of got the international bug. Though it'd been there in the back of my mind, it had always been festering away. And I'd done a few secondments out in California. Mm-hmm. So I'd met a few international teachers, international baccalaureate teachers. And then this job came across. It didn't actually come across my desk. It was in one of the newspapers in the staff room. And I don't know if you've ever had this, but multiple people came to me to show me this job. And it was either they want rid of me or they genuinely think that I would be a good fit for this job. And it was this weird, wacky traveling school. Applied for it, had an interview out in Germany, a weekend in Germany, had an interview, got the job. And I was, a few months later, the same principal who had given me a chance as a student and then was my boss for 7 years, actually gave her blessing. She actually, I always remember it was beautiful. She said, "If you were my son, I'd really want you to do this. So you go with my blessing." So I left Loreto College, as it was called in Manchester, got on a plane, Tarek, and landed in Buenos Aires. And that was the start of my 12-year journey with Think Global School. Left there 2 years ago with some backing from our founder and our investors to launch the Think Learning Studio, which is our teacher, educator, design studio. So that's, in a nutshell, the journey.
I think it's a brilliant journey. It's more of an adventure than a journey. I think if you really put it down to that. pardon the pun, or rather, in this case, pun intended, we're a little bit old school when it comes to teaching and education, and the love of teachers and the love of the whole ethos of learning. And, you know, for me, one of the phrases that I use is that education is fine, but it's actually learning. And learning how to learn is what the future is about. So as you were growing up, as a young teacher, was learning one of the key drivers, or was it just, oh, I've got to get these kids through school and get them to get their grades and pass them and get into universities? Because that's the shift that's happening now.
Yeah, it was survival as an early teacher. I have to be honest. So as you exit teacher training college, it's survival, and I wish it wasn't, but it is. You are surviving, and teachers, educators across the world will feel this. You know, at the Think Learning Studio, we teach teachers in many different countries around the world, and when you are beginning in the profession, it's about the survival of your timetable. It's about trying to prove yourself. You know, that staff room is a very strange place in schools, and you've got to kind of do your time and get proven, and then maybe the experienced teachers will talk to you and say hello. And it's about, you're right in what you said. It's about grades that you're producing through your students. Now, they're not your grades, but you are pretty well made to feel that they're your grades. Yeah. And it can be ruthless because, you know, formula funding, bums on seats, and if your school and college, as I worked, isn't secure in that competitive market. You know, in Manchester, you know, Manchester City, the football team, have opened a college. This college is opening by an ex-Manchester United player, Gary Neville. He's opened a college. We have the religious colleges, you have the state schools, stroke colleges. So there's this huge competition for bums on seats, and you have to deliver, and the results have to be good so they can go to the marketing department, and they can then shout from the rooftops of what you get. So I would say it is survival. Obviously learning happens, but I don't think learning happens in necessarily the way it's not a formula that I think would be in the textbooks.
Yeah. The reason I asked that question, Russ, was that teachers and perhaps nurses, two amazing great professions, are perhaps the lowest paid professions. So when you said it was about survival, I thought it was more about the fact that you basically been offered a minimum wage and you're really guiding and shaping the minds and the futures of young people. What are your thoughts on that, and the fact that teachers aren't paid as well for the work and the contribution and their importance in the world?
The paradox is, though, I rarely heard about wages in the staff room. So if I go back upon my 7 years in and out of our multiple staff rooms on campus, I can probably go on one hand how many times you heard a grumble about pay. It actually wasn't that prevalent. Hours and workload, sure, they're there. But actually the consciousness around pay is probably there with individuals, but it's not probably articulated as much as A, it should be, or B, maybe we expect it to be. And I think some of that is we all go into the profession knowing roughly, you know, the paycheck. So, you know, to grumble about it 2 or 3 years in, it's kind of like, well, we all knew what we were signing up for. So yeah, I do wish nurses and teachers were paid more, but then you have to then realize many countries are deeply in debt, and you know they're going on right now. You'll know this. You know they're deeply in negotiations now with teachers and nurses about pay rises, inflation. You know what can realistically be offered, and I think that is why we're seeing this teacher flight from places like the US and UK, and we here in Dubai we see huge numbers of teachers come in for better pay, better conditions.
Yeah, you know. The reason I want to talk a little bit more about this is that I call it the education industrial complex. Education institutions have become money-making machines, and this to me is a huge concern. The big endowments at Princeton and Harvard, I mean, they could just on the interest and the money that they make from their endowments, they could run the whole university and have money to spare. But they still go out there and sell and extremely expensive. So Why is that happening, and is this healthy?
Well, it's all we've known. It's like this for multiple generations. We've had a few universities that have been the aspirations of maybe our generation and generations now. You know, we would reel off the same probably 10 universities across the world that people would desire to go to. Probably not healthy, no, but I think what's going on right now, there's a lot of signals around emerging courses and institutions that are consciously trying to be very different. So if you look at someone like the London Interdisciplinary School, you know, you have coming out of the old regime, so to speak, either the old regime is going to have to innovate and get really creative pretty quickly, or these new institutions are going to pop up and begin to, I mean, we've seen at Think Global School, huge numbers of our students apply to the Netherlands. They are conscious consumers now. They're not just going to go through old hoops, pay astronomical fees. They're getting the really smart, savvy consumers now about where they go to university, and we're seeing that at Think Global.
It's a nice little segue into discussing education today and education as it's in the future. Do you think our schools today are helping and preparing our kids for tomorrow?
What a question. I mean, the clear answer, and in the answer probably you and I have heard throughout conferences across the world, is no. And there's a whole number of reasons why that isn't happening. They're not skills-based. They're not tied to what's actually going on in the world. However, I'm of the mindset, you know, I was speaking to one of my mentors the other day, and it was, you know, this reimagining of education. And I'm kind of sick and tired of like the reimagining. You know, we've reimagined and it actually doesn't do us much good. We reimagined around AI for about 5 or 10 years. And then when AI and ChatGPT hit last November, everyone was taken by shock. I was sat with friends saying, didn't we do this? Didn't we prepare for this? Because that's all I heard for 10 years was artificial intelligence, the metaverse, and blockchain. So the answer is probably no. However, I think we've got to be careful about beating the education community around the head with this too much. The idea that, you know, you're not preparing these young people for the real world. Sure, okay, we get that. So I think we've got to move now. Okay, what decisive steps can either the business world, the foresight world, the education world itself actually do to begin to prepare these young people for the future? Because when we talk about this, I often get worried that, well, the future's not one thing. It's multi. We can see some strong signals around artificial intelligence, but then we had a strong signal about the metaverse, and that seems to have stagnated a little. We're not quite sure what direction that will lead to. So I think we need more decisive conversations about what this redesign could look like. Now we've reimagined it.
Yes.
We need some more concrete conversations around redesign, because there isn't one future, as we know. There's multiple. And I think that is what we need to start to discover, because different schools and different styles of educational institutions will take their future direction in different ways. So I think we need a consciousness around that, rather than just saying the future is this and we're all going to go there. Well, probably not.
My concern is the regulators in some cases, because are they responsive enough? Are they adaptable enough? Are they quick enough to be able to respond to the exponential change that is happening in the world? And that is part of my concern. The other thing is just looking at ChatGPT, and we've mentioned that a couple of times. One of the studies that I've seen is that by 2029 or earlier, the ChatGPT will be able to replace software engineers and coding as we know today. So literally it's complete collapse before the end of this decade. So all of the people who've gone into coding and software development and so on, they will not have a job in 2029, gone. So if we need to anticipate that, but we're still doing a lot of coding classes and development in there, rather than developing more holistic skills and problem-solving skills and empathy and and love and all of the other kinds of things, attributes that we should have. So my concern is that the regulators are working perhaps incrementally, and in a linear fashion, while the world is growing at an exponential rate. So do we run two parallel systems simultaneously? Do they start merging and fusing in some ways together? How do you see that happening? Because I know you and I have seen some of this fusion happening.
I would love to see more diversity in the inspection regime. It's coming from the UK, the inspection regime is very hard. It's very harsh. Everyone panics when the inspectors come in, and you rarely see a true picture of the school. The snapshot the inspectors and the government see of a school actually is probably quite far off what goes on a day-to-day, because everyone just adapts. Now, that was going on in the 90s, and if that's still going on today, which by all accounts it is, then clearly you're right, and the inspection, the governance of schools is too slow to adapt.
Yeah.
So I would really like to see more creativity, more dynamism in the inspection, in the governance of schools. One real way that this could happen would be alternative pathways. The pathway right now is, what are your results? We're going to walk around, we're going to hang out for a couple of days, and we're going to create a snapshot of this school. We've got to do better than that. And I think governments and education departments and ministries need to get much more creative in how they're going to monitor schools. And there's got to be a clearer message to administration of schools. Like, don't worry, we're here to support you. We at Think Global School, we've got an incredible regulator who allow us to take risks. And they articulate that to us.
Right.
Say, listen, don't worry, we're coming in, but we're here to help you, not here to judge you. And people will be up in arms about this, because then they'll say, well, standards will start to slip. Well, the standards didn't slip with us. We've done this for over 10 years, I think, Global School. And actually our standards, we keep trying to raise those standards with the support from the regulators we have.
Yeah.
So I agree with you. I think we need much more dynamism, much more innovation. And the departments and ministries must get out a message of support, not rigid observation. And there's also, I think, through this rigid observation, there's also a perception, this could be wrong, but there's also a perception that what will follow this observation, if not done well, is punishment.
Right.
Now, not many people can articulate that punishment, but there's a fear, there's a dread that if we don't get this inspection or this governance right of our institution, I might lose my job, we might lose our status as a satisfactory school or an excellent school, or a school that pulls in IB scores of 40 plus. So there's got to be better articulation between schools and ministries and governance. Where are we all heading with this?
In business, I have a golden rule. It's called the 70-20-10 rule. That's 70% of our time we spend on our core business, and we optimize within our core, and 10x innovation within the core. 20% is on the edge to extend our business, new ideas, new products, new geography, new thinking. And 10% is blue sky thinking. So just while you were talking, it just occurred to me, perhaps we can do exactly the same with education. We spend 70% of our time in our core curriculum and structure. Yep. We look at 20% of our time to look at what are the future requirements, and 10% of the time do funky new stuff. Travel school, or taking sabbaticals, or whatever else you want to do as something completely fresh and new.
Yep.
Is that a formula that could work? Which works in business, could it work in education?
Absolutely. It's what we've done for a decade. We always have time where we go into a sandpit, we come up with new ideas, we prototype new courses, new approaches. We're doing that right now at Think Global School.
But you're doing it at Think Global School, but if you look at a traditional school in this country, for example, they're just tinkering on the edges as far as the future is concerned, and they're becoming more and more familiar with the future, which is encouraging, but not fast enough. I, as a futurist, I reinvented myself 7 years ago, and I used to say 7 years ago I was 7 years ahead. 3 years ago, I was 3 years ahead. Today, I'm marginally like 6 months ahead, and I'm struggling because everybody is quite familiar, at least with the jargon. What they don't have is context, depth, how the dots are connected, convergence, divergence. Those are the things that I can contribute to as far as that's concerned. My fear, no, I shouldn't use the word fear. My concern and my thoughts are that I don't think the schools, because they are money-making machines, are actually looking at anything beyond just pleasing the parents, ensuring they're looked after, and are they actually executing? And I know that's something important to you.
It is, and what you'll find as well, and we found this, is often those actors in the ecosystem who want innovation, who want creativity. There's always a period where, we find this in our school, where parents and students will actually want to go back to the old system. There'll be an uncomfortable part of the process, usually about 2 or 3 months in, after the honeymoon period finishes, where it's like, can't we just go back to an exam? Can you just give me an exam? Like, this portfolio, project-based learning stuff, it's cool, but just give me an exam. So there is a bit of, and as you said, there are some real powerful actors out there. I worked behind the curtain at the exam board for many years before I was a teacher, so I've seen behind the curtain. The idea that, courses are linked to textbooks, which we buy, we've already talked about course results are linked to your marketing department, what they can say, what they can't say. So this is as you said, this is a big machine, and the disruptive forces are there. But as I joke with some of our partners who are leading other schools around the world, who are doing kind of what we hope is some kind of cool stuff as well, is we're not really making a dent, if we're honest. We're doing some cool stuff with our 60 to 80 students in these small schools, but actually these big groups of schools, I don't need to name them, we know them. They are absolute machines. And why, you're right, why should they innovate? They don't need to. The money's coming in, the exams work, people come in, they take the test, they move on to university, the statistics line up, so why should they change? So do we then appeal to a more moral and ethical argument? Maybe it's around the future, maybe it's around, as we talked about when you and I had the debate a few months back, do we talk about mental health? Do we talk about, is this right? Is this snapshot of the 3-hour exam? Is this Tarek? Are you a reflection of a 3-hour exam? I don't think we are. But the argument right now isn't penetrating enough as it needs to. And that's a concern.
So how important are degrees now? I know they're diminishing, we talk about that, but I think it's a very, very slow burn. Degrees are still important for the vast majority of people. And you mentioned London Interdisciplinary School, Minerva, and others. If you ask an average CEO, I think 99 out of 100 will not know them, not know these institutions.
Agreed.
And therefore, it's not quite mainstream yet. So how long is this going to take that degrees are going to be, nice to have, but not a need to have, as we have today?
Yeah, I just read a wonderful book by Blake Bowles on exactly this. And I think what's wrong is our understanding of degrees. I think we're still under the impression that the knowledge and the information that we get in degrees is worthwhile. And it's quite simply, it's not. It gets outdated really fast. Especially things like computer engineering, something like it, that will be, whatever you learn in any institution will be completely different in 5 to 10 years' time. And what Blake Bowles says on this, which I really like, is degrees are more around signaling. You're signaling to an employer that you can go through a 3-year experience, you can turn up on time, you can do your essays, you can jump the hoops. And and I think there is some truth in that, the idea that employers still know if you've gone through a 3 to 4 year degree, there are some certain prerequisites that you have that you will give to whatever institution is employing you. I don't see that going away anytime soon, but I see that the technicals of whatever we're learning on the degree, that's getting outdated in real time very fast.
Speed is certainly one of the issues because 20 years ago, it used to take 10 years to go out of date. Today, it takes 2 years to go out of date. And so, and I think that's something that obviously needs to be addressed. The technical organizations like Apple and Facebook and Google and stuff, who are effectively the multi-trillion-dollar companies, they are leading this charge of we really need peer reviews from GitHub rather than a degree from MIT 10 years ago. What is your view on peer reviews and this sort of new thinking that is there, and perhaps in the interdisciplinary environment also, you have these peer reviews. What are your thoughts on that?
Yeah, it's huge. The feedback from when you and I were at school was fairly one-dimensional. You know, if you set up a business now or an education institution, you're after peer reviews. You're after other men, and I think what we define as peer has massively expanded as well.
Sure.
You know, there's a huge scope. You know, we have a student in our school who has close to, or a graduate from our school has close to 1 million followers on YouTube. You know, this is a teenager. That's she could be a peer to some institutions and some industry who want to revamp their marketing. You know, so I think the concept of peer is massively expanded. But we can't deny that the idea that the reviews that any institution get across the world of the internet, across various platforms, you know, another one was added last week in the form of threads.
Yeah.
You know, so you want these reviews. We chase them ourselves. You know, we want other actors to say, yeah, what you're doing is good. Here's the stamp.
We've discussed a lot of the context, and the one thing that I really would like your views on before we move to Think Learning Studio and then Hakoda Forum and other things which are very close to your heart is ChatGPT, generative AI, and education. Where is the crossover point there? What are your teachers thinking at this point in time, and how do you envisage, with your voice into the future, into the 2, 3, 5, 10-year future, how is this going to shape and change the world that we're in? Yeah,
I mean, it started, as you and I have spoken about, with such a bang. it was such a bomb going off at early parts of the year. I think it's kind of, for me, talking to a lot of principals, a lot of actors within education, education is really interesting. It's interesting how everyone's now gone for summer, for example. You know, we're doing this interview in July. So everything's kind of died down. And a few key actors are pushing out articles and their thoughts on ChatGPT and AI. My fear is, though, actually, within classrooms across the world who have access to this, what we might have, rather than a universal approach, a very exciting universal approach around things like, you know, AI mentors and digital twins and how AI can revolutionize learning, my fear is that we might have various actors across schools and industry that are using AI very heavily, and then 80% kind of drop off and use it intermittently. So I've been surprised in the last few months, actually, in very much some dominant voices emerge. That shouldn't actually, I'll correct myself there. It's not surprising there's been dominant voices emerge. That happens in any field. But actually, I'm curious where this goes next. Now, are we going to start creating ethical structures of usage? Are these many AI tutor platforms that are now slowly being released, are they going to merge into one or two dominant ones? The rivals for ChatGPT, I know Claude just released a few days ago an update that's supposed, I've not used it yet, but it's supposed to be very good. Are we going to get any rivals to ChatGPT? I'm not sure. I remember during the pandemic, there was a whole raft of LMS platforms released. You know, I felt I was being called every 2 days, a new LMS platform, trial it for your school. So I think we are looking at a phase now of a lot of educational platforms being released. I think we're also looking at through dominant actors emerging through the noise to begin becoming, you know, thought leaders in this field. So I'm curious. I'm really for me, I'm at an inflection point where I'm very curious what's next. I think through the madness, little strands are emerging, but for me, they're unclear. It's unclear how we're going to use this in schools.
Yeah. My thought is that as ChatGPT becomes more present and omnipresent almost, which it is most likely to be, critical thinking goes through the roof. Creativity is extremely important, and all of the more human attributes that we need to learn, those suddenly become 10 times, 100 times more valuable as ChatGPT can just deliver the baseline. But we need all of this because I mean, ultimately, it's a very, very efficient cut and paste machine, and it just pops things out very, very quickly.
Yeah.
But then you have to sort of look back and sort of say, hang on, does this actually make sense? There's a lot of platitudes and words, and it all looks very good. And one of my colleagues, he's 23, he's out there, and he suddenly produces stuff for me, and it looks really, really good. But I have to sort of read it 2 or 3 times and say, but this is, I said, did you got it from ChatGPT? And he said, yes, I did. I said, read it again and reread it and see if it's really delivering what we are looking for. So we need to be asking new questions. We need to have the power of questioning, listening, and understanding, critical thinking. Those are the new muscles we need to be developing. And I think perhaps that is a really integral part of what schools should be looking at, is developing those muscles much, much more than ever before.
Agreed. I think a few new skills are going to emerge through the educational system. The idea of prompting, questioning is going to be a huge skill of the future now. How we compose questioning. Ron Berger called it a beautiful question. That all comes back now. We've worked around driving questions for years.
Yes.
In my world, but all of a sudden with AI, questioning becomes huge. And as you said, and I completely agree with you, I think how we review material, how we reflect on material also becomes a huge skill, because the students or the professionals who just regurgitate ChatGPT are going to be exposed very quickly. And then once you've exposed yourself as purely cut and pasting, it's going to be hard to regain that reputation. I did just cut and paste it. So I think we've got to be really careful about just regurgitating ChatGPT. We've got to become good reviewers of material, and attaching our own voice to AI all of a sudden is this new skill in the world. I've got a foundation of knowledge here, and I'm going to rewrite it in my own voice here. Now that is going to be very different from what you and I might have produced without ChatGPT. So almost 3 realities emerge: a purely AI one, a hybrid one, and what would have been created, which probably isn't now, if AI wasn't around.
I was looking at a chart in terms of all written, printed material ever. ChatGPT is now at about between 90 to 95%. So within the next 3 to 4 months, it'll be at 100%. So effectively, it becomes all-knowing. It's omniscient, effectively. And because it's all-knowing, and I've been thinking about this a lot and translating it into business. So if we know everything, then does search exist in the future? In the way that we know it today? Probably not, because all you have to do is ask ChatGPT and then it gives you the answer. Recommendation engines for e-commerce and stuff like that, would they exist really?
Do you use Google as much?
I do.
Do you? My usage
mine has dropped. Yes, a little bit. So search, recommendation engines, news. That's going to get affected. That industry is going to potentially, and even digital news. I mean, you just say, I'd like to know about this and this. Go and search, or whatever my preferences are. So that's gone. Advertising. Why would we need to advertise when we know all of the characteristics of everything? So I'm now looking at 4 massive industries in the world being fundamentally changed.
Absolutely.
And then I bring that back to the education and learning space, which you represent, and sort of say, are we preparing our thinking, our young people, 16, 17, 18-year-olds who are about to go out into the world over the next 5, 6, 7 years? They're going to go through this transition of no search, no recommendations, no advertising, no news, perhaps, or much substantially reduced, and how they're going to cope with that level of transformation.
Yes, I just had a conversation about exactly this with a brilliant friend of mine out in Vancouver, and he said exactly the same thing. I do not think we have really thought about the jumps, the things that we've skipped.
Yes.
The idea that when we've put together something through artificial intelligence and it's kind of produced at the other end, and we do a bit of reframing and a bit of reforming, and then we submit it quietly, hope they don't notice. There's a whole process that we used to go through, the creative process that you talked about before, that's kind of missed. Now, is there some wonderful things at the other end? Of course there is. ChatGPT AI is being this creative spark for us, and that's brilliant. And that has many usage usage is. However, I think there is a gap in the middle, a struggle, so to speak, that you and I would have gone through in creating articles and whatever we're producing in our professional world. And I'm not sure if we've given enough thought and time about are we going to pay a price for that somewhere down the line?
Yeah.
Or is just the process going to change? And processes change from the 60s to the 70s to now. Processes always evolve. And this is just another evolution.
Yeah. So let's talk about your current role at the Think Learning Studio as MD, which sort of morphed away from your global travel school. Can you talk to us about that and share what you're doing and how it's sort of morphed into where we are today?
Yeah, we believe there's a pressing need to help teachers. Teachers are really struggling in this new world. Educators are largely taught in a very stagnant environment and a very siloed environment. So when you go through teaching college, you are a maths teacher, you're a history teacher. And then what we found over many years is as teachers enter the world of schooling, which is undergoing this massive transformation around things like challenge-based learning, project-based learning, AI, these young teachers, or don't have to be young, but these teachers who are young to the profession, like, what's going on? Like, I wasn't prepared for this. I was prepared for a class who would quietly sit in front of me. I would teach my history class. And all of a sudden, we're hearing things like interdisciplinary learning and project-based learning. That was never mentioned to me when I went through teacher training college. So we see a huge gap. The mission of the Think Learning Studio is to be a guide into this unknown and project-based learning. And we're helping educators take that first step into this world. It's a very delicate step. It's a very hopefully well thought out step from my team. And we're helping educators make that journey into an education world, especially in the high school environment, which is changing very rapidly.
And what's the level of enthusiasm and uptake on this? Are people jumping onto this, or they're still struggling?
It's very dubious at first. Like, why are you here launching this training experience that's been green lighted by either the principal or founders or investors? But honestly, as we move through the journey with our partners, who are the teachers on the ground, we've really seen enthusiasm come back. A love of learning, as you started out the interview with, come back into our participants.
Yeah.
And honestly, every course we've run, by the final day, whether it's a 3 or 5 day experience, which tends to be the length, we just see this magic return to these educators who love learning interactively. They love the students moving around the class and doing group work and being challenged, who are not just absorbing information. They're doing so much more than that. So we've seen the uptake be, if I'm honest, dubious at first, but really flourishing by the end.
You had a 12-year adventure with the Global Travel School. What was that like? And is that a new option that every school should have in every country, perhaps?
I would love schools to embrace some form of exploration. We are absolutely aware that schools cannot do what we've done, which is move around the world. However, some form of exploration, whether it be in the form of a rite of passage, whether it be in the form of just an exploration, somewhere even local. We explore locally as much as we explore globally. So I would encourage every school to do that.
Could you define the Global Travel School? Because I know it, I understand it.
Yeah.
But for the audience, exactly what it is.
Yeah, so Think Global School, we go to 4 countries every year. Those countries are very carefully selected on the grounds of, can we do fun and engaging modules? Is it safe? Do we have local experts on the ground? So we're not just passers through, we actually have local experience and people who know the terrain, who can really educate us. And then, our students spend 1 week online before they arrive in country, really understanding where they're going to and why they're going there. And then it's 7 weeks on the ground, immersed in modules, personal projects, mastery projects, capstone. We have a whole wellness program they go through, because there is that detachment from home that they go through that we need to have eyes on.
And how old are they? And
15 to 18.
15
so
to 18.
grade 10 to
Yeah.
18. Yeah. It's-
And what's the transformation that they go through? I mean, is that sort of curriculum accepted by the school? Is it did they get credits for it, or is it just a holiday?
No, fully credited program. It's a full high school diploma program. Our students go to universities all over the world.
Yeah.
We're fully endorsed by an American organization called WASC. And yeah, it's a full high school transfer. It's school. So
All right.
they leave, and they. But you asked before a really good question. The transformation. It's huge.
Yeah.
It's honestly, you travel with these young people. You explore the world with these young people, and you see this growth that is just humongous. It's honestly, it's mind blowing. And we will go through our photo histories, and because we have a media person who charts this, and you look at these, and I know that's the same with every human. We all grow, yeah. But in terms of the work they're producing, in terms of the level of reflection and insight, it's just huge.
Yeah. No, I feel that something like that, which gets people involved. I mean, you were at Great Barrier Reef, you're exploring into new environments and so on. Kids with ADHD, kids with learning disabilities, kids with dyslexia, who may be struggling at school, but they would absolutely thrive in a place like this, wouldn't they?
They do. I came from a school before Think Global School. We had a brilliant department to support students like this. We have that department, but we rarely have to use it because the learners are charting their own journey, their own educational journey, because they're creating their experience alongside their educators. They're obviously learning how to curate and create an experience that suits and is tailored for them. Mm-hmm. So if you have a student who's dyslexic, who's dyspraxic, they are allowed, they can create that journey that suits their own characteristics. And it's so powerful. It's so powerful.
Another amazing thing that you're doing is the Hakuda Forum. Could you share a little bit about the ethos, the thinking behind it, and where it's at the moment?
Yes, in March this year, we went to the mountains of the Alps of Japan, called Hakuba. The Nagano Olympics was there, so there's an old Olympic village. And we brought together, I think it was 40, 45 global leaders, brilliant minds of education. And we really explored. We explored not just the future of education, but we explored real steps that we could make with each other as a community. And it wasn't your typical conference like one and done. Like, this is going to now, we hope, be a movement across many years. So March next year, 2024, we'll go back and we'll start building more. We'll start building. I think we've built trust in a community. It's going to be open for others to join. Yeah. And as we said before, we're going to not just reimagine, we're actually going to do some real hard yards of redesigning what can be the next steps for schools around the world. We've got people from ministries, department, the governor of Nagano is involved now. So yeah, we want the Hakuba Forum to become a hub of educational thought leadership that's giving educators around the world real tangible steps to changes they can make in schools.
I love Japan in terms of its culture and heritage and all the wonderful things. They're not known for transformational change. They're known for very, very glacial change.
Yeah.
And then you have taken something which is very forward-looking into Japan. What's the thinking behind that? I'm sure there are a few sort of drivers behind it.
Yeah, we got a beautiful talk from the governor of Nagano. He came to the Hakuba Forum and he spent in Japanese for 30 minutes. He really gave us a history lesson on northern Japan. And what was interesting is Nagano was known for philosophy and thinking. It would be a place where, theory of knowledge would thrive. And he really said it had been lost, probably since the Second World War. This way of thinking had been lost, and it had become very much more regimented. And his dream was to bring this back to northern Japan and his districts. He wanted to bring back a way of thinking which was creative. And yeah, so our forum will hopefully serve two purposes: be a beacon internationally, but also really be mindful of its local surroundings and local roots, and help local schools in and around northern Japan to also, move into the future. And actually, people who were attending the Hakuba Forum in the days after actually went around Japan. They made new friends. They were visiting schools and sharing ideas with you. So this community kind of grew instantaneously. That it was brilliant. It was brilliant. And even now we have a WhatsApp group, and members of the Hakuba Forum will be visiting each other in and around the world,
Right.
and sharing ideas and sharing inspiration. So that's beautiful.
No, it's amazing. I think we can learn a lot from Japan and from their history and culture and heritage and philosophy and so on. Are you planning to have little nodes like the Hakuba Forum in other parts of the world, or is it once a year you go back to the center?
It'll be once a year we go back to Hakuba. However, if someone wanted to create a node somewhere else in the world, of course we would be open to that. We want to encourage the movement to grow and spread.
Right.
However it can. So yeah, if someone wanted to create a Hakuba Forum, Rio or Mexico City or wherever, then of course we'd be open to that.
Okay,
yeah.
Brilliant. We've spoken a lot about several things. What are you most passionate about? What is something that excites you and keeps you going every single day of your life?
I'm really excited at this point to get the message out. I'm very lucky to live here in the UAE, and I've seen such incredible innovation in and around the GCC region. My next steps that I'm really excited about is now we've got a proof of concept. Think Global School's been around now for over a decade, is to go into governments and ministries and share a message of hope that education doesn't have to look like it did in the 1970s. And that doesn't just apply for the GCC, that applies across, we've worked with schools in Mexico, in Colombia, So I'm really excited about the next stage of my own development, of taking this message of proof of concept and inspiration around a small school that traveled the world, that can be so much more. It can be a beacon to say to ministries, to governments, to education leaders, this can work. This can work. We don't need to be scared about parents or universities or the students themselves. I think we can have great hope in the future of education when we just take the reins off these young people and let them explore. Yeah. And I think the movement, what I'm also excited about, is really trying to educate people around this movement, which I feel is being hijacked a little around, what people are calling progressive education. It's just a bit of a circus. It's not rigorous. There's no testing. Therefore, you're letting these young people down in some way. Is to really countering that with, this is rigorous. This learning like an architect that we do at Think Global School, this portfolio, this intersection of portfolio, place, and project-based learning that we have, this can be rigorous, but it can also be exciting. It can challenge these young people, but it can also galvanize hope and inspiration. And that's what I'm excited about, getting out that message.
Yeah. This whole podcast is about voices in the future. You're a voice of the future, and you are projecting this voice, this passion of yours. In the same genre, can we also look at your biggest concern and biggest fear as you look into the future of education, the future of learning, and what are you most worried about that needs to be addressed, and hopefully sooner rather than later?
Yeah, I'm going to use some inspiration from yourself that you used before. I think what I'm most worried about, and I just hinted at it then, is actually as we make headway in these small disruptive models that begins to turn heads of educators and school leaders around the world. Actually, what you said before, this industrial model around education will react. And in that reaction, you'll get models that could provide some real hope for young people become discredited. And it's already happening. It's already happening, sadly, in some pockets around the world. we've got to go back. Testing is the only way. Militaristic style of schools is the only way. That you've got to instill discipline, and there's only one way of doing it, and it looks like something from Prussia in the 1800s. And I really fear this will come back. There's going to be a reaction to the form of. So we have to be really on top of our data. It's schools that are really trying to disrupt and push a new vision for education. We've got to be on top of our brief. We can't just go around with good vibes and say everything's going to be all right. We need to realize that. So we've got to be on top of our data. We need to know where our alumni have gone to university. We need to have good data from our alumni. We need to make sure that our young people are well and healthy through this system. So we've got to be on top of our brief, because this pushback is going to come, and it's going to come hard.
Yes.
And I think we owe it to ourselves to not just push through on good vibes and good energy. That will not be enough. So any school that's going down this path of projects or challenge or portfolio-based learning, please be on top of your brief, because you are going to get a very firm reaction in the next few years against what we are trying to do. Yeah. This industrial complex will push back.
100%.
Because we're crazy if we think it isn't going to.
Yeah, and then the industrial complex is making more and more money, and the parents will sell their jewelry and mortgage their home, but they'll pay for the kid to go to the right college. Absolutely. That they think that they can afford. And I think that is going to really, really affect us, which is a wonderful segue into parents. What is your advice to parents? Should they be worried? Should they be excited? Should they be just involved and engaged? What is your core advice to parents as we look into the future now?
Well, I've worked with parents for the last decade in an education system, especially in the early days, that no right-minded parent would send their young son or daughter to. So, and what I can say is, it's okay. You can take I know it's almost a paradox. How could you take a chance on your child's education? I think my message to parents is, I think we're going to be very soon at an intersection when it's more of a risk to put your young person in a system that we know is harming them mentally. Mm-hmm. We know is not the voice or vision of the future. And I think playing it safe, which I understand many parents have done up until this point, I think soon the risk will be keeping them in the box of the current system. So as you look around the internet, as you chat GPT and ask it for innovative schools, there's going to be a growing selection of schools that are going to do it differently. We're already seeing this with the high school version of Minerva, the online school, which is beginning to emerge. They have an office here in Dubai. Models like ours, Think Global School, School of Humanity. All these different schools that are popping up. Parents, explore them. They're an option now. Mm-hmm. They're not going to damage young person. All these schools will have data on their young people doing incredible things in the world. To parents who are really thinking about this, where should I send my young person to school, is what's going to do them more damage? Putting them in this regulated exam-based box, or setting them free to explore, create, innovate. Yeah.
The traditional form of schooling and our learning was 4 to 24, and then you spend the next 50 years, until you retire and whatever, and that was your learning. Today, there are two drivers. One driver is longevity. Currently, it's about 82 years. It's likely to go up to about 100 in the next 25 years, and up to about 130 to 150 in the next 50 to 75 years, with all the longevity work that's going on at this point in time. So therefore, once we come out at the age of 24 from a university, we have 100 years to live. And it completely changes the game.
Yeah.
So it changes this calculus, it changes the dynamic. So now what I'm thinking of is, is it really 4 to 24 or is it 4 to 124? Number one. So I'm a lifelong learner personally, and I'm very curious, and I'm childlike in my thinking, in my reading, in my curiosity, in my approach to lots and lots of new things, and I'm very diverse in my thinking, but I constantly learn and develop, and I haven't stagnated, and that's sort of me personally. I've made an effort towards it. My key question is that there are two parts to it. One part is ongoing learning, getting into what I would call business life, and how do we make that bridge, that transition into business life. And if you're already in business life, what do you need to learn, relearn, and unlearn as you go forward, as Alvin Toffler said, that the illiterate of the future are not the ones who can't read and write, but who can't unlearn, learn, and relearn. So if that's the case, then what's the new dynamic for a business world?
Well, I mean, speaking personally, I can't imagine retiring in 20 years, which is what, under the old model, I feel like I'm just getting started. I mean, I'm in my mid-40s. So it's, the whole game has changed. And I think countries are struggling. You had the protest in France where they tried to raise the retirement age. But it makes sense. It's like, we are living so much longer. So what are we going to do if people do start to live to 100, 110, 120? What are you going to do for
Yes.
what are you going to do for 60 years? So we have to learn, relearn, unlearn. That has to become part of how we train as young people. That this will be normal. And God, I think of things I was doing with the Think Learning Studio, with Think Global School 3 years ago, and I've completely pivoted and done a 180. I can't believe. I don't feel I've mastered anything at 44, So I think you're absolutely right. We have to have this childlike approach to learning, and we have to normalize it. We have to completely normalize unlearning and relearning. And it's fun. It's fun to do that.
Yeah, absolutely. And I'm also talking about thinking globally. I mean, you can have a 75-year-old philosopher in Japan, particularly with not all of the translation capabilities that now we have. Working with a 10-year-old in Peru and co-creating something, and the global consciousness can improve, the collective intelligence can enhance. I know I'm talking woohoo stuff, but this is a future-related conversation. But this is the kind of thing that really energizes me, is to sort of say, we can change the status quo and make it genuinely global, make it genuinely connected, make it genuinely lifelong, as opposed to, talking about universities and inspectors and parents making decisions. I think it's a lifelong thing now. What do we need to do as more sort of in this age group, in the 40s and 50s, that enable us to relearn and reinvent ourselves? I have done it 3-4 times in my life. Not many people are able to do that. What do we need to do to give them that energy, that catalyst, that encouragement? Because I think if they don't change, they'll get left behind massively, and it's more scary not to change now than to actually go about changing.
Yeah, it absolutely is. I think we've got to really encourage the concepts of entrepreneurship.
Yeah.
And I think that has to be entrepreneurship of yourself. Me as an entrepreneur.
Yeah.
And I might not live as an entrepreneur in its purest sense, in the business sense. But I think if that is normalized throughout multiple generations, that we're all entrepreneurs. We're all, the idea that any of us would stay in one existence, one job. Yeah. But that was completely normal.
Yes.
So for my father's generation.
My father's generation, exactly that. Yes.
So it's changed so quickly.
Yeah.
So I think we need a bit of patience with ourselves as well, because it has changed fast. Yeah. But I think we've got to realize very quickly that we are all entrepreneurs. There's infinite opportunities out there now in the current landscape, and we see this. We should draw inspiration from our young people. And look how dynamic. I mean, if you look at someone like Mr. Beast on YouTube, hundreds of millions of followers. As I said before, a student at Think Global School with a huge following on social media. Now, our young people are getting very dynamic with their careers, and we would have laughed at this 10 years ago. If a student sat in front of us and said, I'm going to launch a YouTube channel, it's going to have a few million followers, and that's going to be, I'm going to go from there. You would kind of, as a career counselor in the late 90s or early noughties, you would lose your mind. You'd be like, no, whoa. However, And I think this is the breakdown. We're seeing the new generations coming out of school right now, so dynamic, so creative with the tools at their disposal, so flexible as tools change and go out of, we still chart MySpace. We can still remember MySpace dying, and, we're all a little sad about, that. And then this thing called Facebook emerged. It was so pedestrian. We remember it.
Yeah, I remember distinctly.
Yeah, we can't keep track now of apps and platforms that die. I think Google still have a site of applications that used to be in their ecosystem that ended up dying and went out of commission. We can't keep pace with it because it happens so. So we, as an older generation, we need to embrace and be inspired by our young people, and if we can just seeing how they adapt and learn, because this is affecting us. You and I spoke at length at the debate about the teacher shortages, and it's trickling up to our generation now that actually people from our you just said yourself, you reinvented yourself, and that's what's happening. People are not just I'm going to be a teacher for 50 years. No one's really thinking like that anymore. So the industry has to adapt and be flexible. We can't hold people hostage in jobs anymore. Here's your pension, 65, you might get a promotion. It's just not going to be like that. The future is not going to be, it might be like that in pockets, but that's not the future. And we're not adapting because we see this with governments now. Governments still think that people don't travel, No, seriously, it's like, when they talk about taxes and they talk about, we're going to put rates up here and there and people will be okay with it. And you sometimes I look at this with some countries, people can move, people can change and, we've come so global and certain pockets of society just haven't realized, or it's head in the sand stuff. But the world is moving fast. So to answer your question, I think we should really take inspiration from our young people who are flexible, dynamic, they pivot fast, they use multiple platforms. That's where we need to get inspired by.
This is the second interview that I've done, and the other one was a mother of a 12-year-old who was raving about Gen Z, while everybody else who's a little bit older are really, really worried about Gen Z, that they are lazy, they can't focus, they can't concentrate. And you're also giving a very positive feedback in terms of what this young new generation, the Gen Z that's coming through, and how they're going to adapt. Do you think they're going to be making a real contribution to the future?
Oh, they're lazy and unfocused when you stick them in a room for 8 hours and give them no inspiration. But you and I would be like that. So I think we have to. They are reacting to an environment that is 100, if not more, years out of date. They're using tools like the pen and pencil that are now extremely dated. These tools were created by generations long gone. So I think we're judging them a little unfairly. What we've seen when you unleash them into a creative world where, yes, you do not have the control you once had as a guide or a mentor or a tutor or a teacher. If we use those labels, then I've not seen them lazy and demotivated. I've seen them absolutely, go to the stars. They're creating some incredible things. But if you stick them in a room for 8 hours a day, being talked at, doing a PowerPoint, yes, of course, you're going to get tired, demotivated young people, of course. But I don't think that's rocket science.
Just 1 second. We're talking to Russell Cailey, the Managing Director of Think Learning Studio, and it's been a really exciting conversation. We've touched all sorts of things and gone and meandered all over the world and come back to how important education, learning and lifelong learning is. So my final question to Russ is, if you, as a voice of the future of learning, future of education, as you project yourself 5 to 10 years from today, and if you were to put a message in a bottle today for us to pick up in 2030 or 2035, what would that message say?
That message would say, I really hope we have unleashed the potential of our young people. I hope we have not held on to things through our own ego and arrogance. The idea that because we feel comfortable doing something, it shouldn't mean that our young people should. Times change. And I really hope if my letter was read by someone downstream, I really hope that we had invested some time and energy on the EQ, on the emotional intelligence, issues around, how we reflect, how we take feedback, how we respond to hard times. I hope that is baked in downstream somewhere when my bottle is sent. So yeah, I hope we've unleashed our young people. I hope we've allowed them to pivot and be flexible. I hope we've not had too much of our own ego attached to old systems that were even further downstream. And I hope we've really paid attention to EQ and emotional intelligence and give it some real thought how we bake that into the educational pie.
Yeah. And perhaps the older people to have adapted as this thing is happening, because yes, the younger people can adapt and grow into and unleash their potential, but I think 2/3 of the world is still older. They need to be an integral part of this thing. So maybe I'll add a little epilogue to your letter.
Yeah, absolutely. This world is not going to get by on just creating an amazing future for school-going young people. That's brilliant. That's what I've invested my life into. Yeah. However, you are right. We have to also sell a vision of the future that is multi-generational.
Yeah.
And like you said, we can't have people living 40, 50 years and just slowly ebbing away. We've got to create a future where people are, as we said before, learning and relearning different skills, different careers, different inspirations, as we do live longer. And that's exciting, that's fun. I think we've got to paint a picture that it's fun to learn and relearn, and we don't all the time. Yeah. We actually have packaged learning, I think, in a really poor way. Like, it's arduous, it's tiresome, you'll never get there. But actually, changing careers and pathways, learning new skills, reinventing yourself as you've done, I think is exciting. It's an exciting process.
It indeed is. And yes, it's an amazing journey for me in this reinvention process that I've done several times. Russ, is there anything that you would like to mention, like to talk about, that we may have missed in this conversation? Any burning piece that you'd like to capture?
I think I'd like to capture, with Think Global School, I have moved around this incredible planet many times. I've lived in some incredible countries, incredible places, with young people who are just trying to explore. They're just trying to explore the world. And I would say that actually we are all struggling with similar things. There's a lot of commonality in some of the hardships that we're facing. And I think, if we reach out to each other, if we support each other, I said in a conversation I had around AI the other day, we've got to help each other and support each other. We're so critical in this Instagram, Facebook, social media led world. We all want the little put down, and we've got to find ways to really encourage each other better. I think we've got very cynical, got very critical, and it's so easy to do.
Yeah.
And I said in our little live stream we did around AI last week with a few thinkers around artificial intelligence, I said, we've just got to put our ego aside and support each other, because we're going to make no one knows this industry. It's only emerged recently in terms of the mass uptake. And I said, we're going to make mistakes. We're going to say silly things. We're going to pitch weird and wonderful questions that we can easily laugh at each other about. But let's just try to support each other. Let's try and back each other up. Let's try and explore together. That's what I'd like to see.
On that wonderful philosophical note, thank you very much indeed. It's been a real pleasure and privilege. Thank you, Russ. Thank you.